In this video, in Evony the King's Return, we're going to be taking a look at the event server versus server. So that's going to be pitting your entire server against an entire different server. For any of those that are brand new to the game and are unsure of this, feel free to check out the rest of my guides on things such as resource gathering, killing bosses, cultivating your generals, obtaining generals, the best ones there are. I've got tons of things available. More to come out in the future. Check those out first and then come back to this one when maybe you understand it a little bit more from the in-game material that's available, which some of it will go through, and me just speaking about my experiences in SVS as it's otherwise known. First, starting with how you actually prepare for it in the first place. So communication is key. You're going to have a lot of drama in servers and a lot of infighting, but you are, for server versus server, obviously going to need to come together with other alliances and making sure that you have a plan for your first one if you haven't done one yet. And if you have done one and you're looking for additional tips, feel free to skip through the video a little bit perhaps. But preparing, communication is key. The king of your server, the person that holds the throne, is going to need to be sending out mails relating to server versus server, making sure everyone's organized and understands the information that we have in this video and my other videos that will help you if people don't know already. Once you have that communication up, which may be beneficial to actually set up a group chat on a different platform, so Discord or Line, which can be downloaded on the App Store and Google Play, are also available. The Discord one is available on browsers as well for anyone that's using desktop. Once you have group chats and things set up, it's going to make it much easier. Past that, there is going to be, in server versus server, a regular Monarch event, but it will just say server in front of it. Instead of 5 events, it will be 6, but it's the same thing with randomized events in terms of their order, with a kill event at the end. Bearing in mind, this kill event will be 2 days long, not 3 days like regular. Other than that, it's pretty much the same, but that means it's going to be fairly easy, even if it's your first SVS, to know what kind of things you can recommend to your players as the king. So make sure the king understands this if they're not you or someone in your alliance, to send out mails during this server Monarch competition to give tips on how to compete in it. A lot of players do not understand the server versus server and might not bother enough to watch videos like this, so you're going to have to tell them every single event when it's on, what they can do to participate, and make sure you incentivize them by telling them what rewards they're going to get from the event itself, because a lot of people just don't bother and don't pay attention. So you're going to need to tell them in world chat via king mails, bearing in mind king mails will only go to alliance leaders, so you need to also make sure that those alliance leaders will send it to the rest of their members as well, and obviously setting up those Discord chats. If your server is not communicating and is infighting, you're going to have big problems come server versus server, so make sure you get that set up beforehand. That's especially the case because just before the server war, which is actually just before the kill event in the Monarch competition, when that happens, you're going to need to purge your server of any points that the other server can get, because it is mostly a kill event, pretty much. Although there are other ways to get points that we'll get into. You're going to need to kill the players that are unprotected by bubbles in your server. You're going to have to make sure, even if it's usually thought of as against the rules, that you clear resource tiles. So if people are on the world map gathering resources, make sure you kill their troops in their city, hit their alliance city if there's any troops in it. Make sure you scout a lot of things. Feel free, if you really want to take resources from them so the other server doesn't get them, because they can take them, and to work with your server on setting that up and doing it in the best way possible for you. A number of servers will make it so only certain keep levels can participate. This both allows it to be much simpler and easier so that you don't accidentally kill people that are participating in the purge, because you don't want to be killing each other with active people that will protect their troops after the purge. They'll bubble again. Once you've set all of that up, killed all of their players, made sure that when they come over to your server, there's nothing to kill. That will really get their ability to score down. Obviously, throughout the server war, you're going to have to be able to do this as well. Checking on hives in your server and destroying players that are unbubbling. It's unfortunate to think that you have to be doing that, even if it is to your friends in another alliance, but eventually they're going to die to the other server anyway, so doing it is better than them dying to someone they don't like. So do keep that in mind. Do tell players that you are going to have to kill people. People generally do it 2 to 6 hours before the server war begins. You're going to be able to check that by going in the event center, scrolling down to the server war. Again, not the kill event, because it will start before the kill event, the server war, and check when this will begin. Mine will begin in about 9 days and 11 hours. Yours may be different. You won't see the server Monarch competition until the one before it ends. So when my one that's currently on ends, the kill event ends, then this one will come on, and then we can see the server Monarch competition instead of the regular one. Other ways to prepare in terms of the actual PvP part of it is to build ranged troops, cultivate your generals, check out my other videos to understand refining of gear, the best gear available, how to get it, and so on. So you can really get your generals up. You can get the amount of ranged troops you have up. The reason for this is most, at least if this is your first SVS, or you're within your first 5 or so, most people are going to have a lot of mounted troops, and ranged troops are good at killing those. So by building generals and an army that is good at killing that troop type, you're going to do very well. In addition to that, ranged are pretty good, and those generals are usually the best ones to have anyway. They're a little bit more versatile than others, although you can build a ground general, a mounted general, and even in extreme cases you could have a siege general that's very good at that. Best just to go with ranged with a bit of siege, both in stats and troops. Check out my other videos on layering and so on to learn about how to attack others effectively without losing as many troops. Obviously you're going to have high stats. You can't just attack someone with low stats where they have high stats and expect to win. So other than purging your server, building up your stats for the troop types I mentioned, and gear, getting your dragons up if you have any. I will have videos on dragons in the future. I don't currently have one, but I do have one for spiritual beasts, which you can check out, which is similar, and you can add those to your generals to increase your stats. Send out those king mails, send out mails to your own alliance on the Monarch competitions, because you're going to need to be able to score as a server quite high to beat the other server and to get a point for each Monarch competition. Bearing in mind the kill event will be worth 2 points if you win. Out of the 6 events, that means there's 7 points available between the 2 servers. Whoever wins will get increased rewards. Whoever loses won't get as much or nearly as much as the other server, although it's still a healthy amount. Apart from that, you are going to need to go into your city, do that research, check out my other videos on that, but I will be going through some SVS specific stuff that you can do. So in recovery, it's not really going to be too much for you, but you can go into the Alliance 1. Feel free to get your ability to reinforce others and rally capacities up so that you can attack those other players with more troops or get more reinforcements into your city. And by getting these reinforcing ones up, the stat ones, they're going to allow you to reinforce other people with a higher stat. Medical aid is obviously going to be good, so make sure you get this up. Rescue is going to be good as well, getting more wounded instead of death. And this one is very particular to server war, increases the single time revived troops power during server war. This comes into effect for anyone confused by that description when you use a revival stone. I can forget what it's exactly called. I might be able to find it in my inventory later. When you use one of those, it will by default revive 150,000 power worth of troops by increasing this research and others, as well as talents. It will increase your ability to use those effectively, spending less gems because they do cost like 1,000 gems each, so it can become expensive, but your troops will be revivable in the hospital rather than the usual just dying outright. So that's a good thing, although you have to spend a lot of gems, so this research is very good. Feel free to check out the rest of the researches, and I'll just leave the rest for the other videos that I already have if you want to check those out. Also, during the server war, your hospital capacity will be increased by 50%, not 50% of your total, but 50% to your overall amount. So here, my current hospital capacity is, I can't be bothered to work it out, but it will increase it by 50% on top of my other stats that you can find in your details by clicking your avatar and just going through your stats. So it won't actually mean that I get 300,000-400,000 extra hospital capacity. It might mean 80,000 or something, I'm not too sure, but bear that in mind. That's going to help you save those troops. And also in the hospital here as well, you'll find the revival button if your troops do die, and you can revive those, I think about 3 days after the server war ends, or maybe it's 3 days from when they get dead in there. So if that is something you can't afford, those troops will disappear, so remember that. Now I'm just going to get into how to actually score in the server versus server. Again, just to go over the server Monarch competition, you will be able to work with the rest of your server to try and get a high score in here. City development, troop training, power increase, etc. is going to be in there. By doing those, you're going to get a score for yourself. That's going to mean you get score rewards like in the regular event that you see. You'll be able to check out how to earn scores in each of these events when it's on, just like you usually can. There'll be certain rewards depending on where you rank in your own server for each event, just as you usually do. But your overall score will be added up with other players on your server and will be compared with a live little graphic on here, and then you'll be able to see how you're stacking up against the enemy server. Whoever has the most points at the very end of each event out of 6 will get a point. When you get those points, it'll help you win the Monarch competition, which is separate from the server war, and you'll get more rewards for being the victorious player. And if you're number 1, you get even more than if you were to lose, but you'll still get rewards no matter what. Also, you have the server war, which is pretty much the kill event. As you see, my previous one is up on screen right now. I'm on the left, my enemy's on the right. We have much less points than the other team because of how some of the scoring works, which I'll get into after I go through just the regular scoring. So if you scroll down, you'll be able to see all of your Monarch rankings when it's actually on. And you can click on the get scores on the top right, and you can check how to get scores. I'll just go through first. If you're on the enemy server, you can't be on your own server to do this, although it's good to deny them by killing them first. You can kill monsters for points, or even boss monsters on the enemy server, and you'll get points for doing so. Obviously, just by killing either on your own server or the enemy server's troops. As you see, it says enemy servers level 3 troop and so on, which is more or less relating to power. When you kill those, you'll get your points. Again, you can see boss monsters here as well. Those will really add up. As you can see on the Monarch scores, my number 1 on my server got about 900 million points. You're going to have to get 300,000 points to start being eligible for some of the rewards. I didn't actually compete in it, I just kind of left it because I was busy. That's why this video is not during an SVS. I will do a future one where it is during SVS to show you some more things. In addition to looking at those scores, you can actually see how many scores the other server has earned off of particular players by clicking this blue icon. So for instance, our top one has got like 900 million points and has lost over 300 million, and so on down the list. We'll go back to those scores just to show you the building ones. So there are 3 temples spotted. So there are 3 temples around the map, the world map, on your server and the enemy server. When you occupy these for an accumulative amount over the server war, which is about 2 days of 6 hours, you will occupy it. By occupying it, you'll give your enemy server a debuff for a few days. And if they do it to you, you'll get a debuff for a few days. So there's march speed being reduced, there's resource gathering, I think, going down, and there's another one. We'll get into those afterwards when I actually go to the buildings. Also, by having 5 million power at least worth of troops inside those buildings, you'll get the points. So it starts at 150 and it will go up. The more troops you have in it, the more points you get per second. So that's why there is between 150 and 2,000 points. There is a cap to it, obviously, as you can see. And the same thing applies to the throne. You can occupy and be the king of another server, just like a regular throne event, pretty much, but you're going up against another server potentially. So make sure you research how to do the throne war. I will have a video in the future on that if you need it. Feel free to ask any questions about anything that I've covered so far, or including the throne war if you weren't too sure on how that's going to work, if you haven't done it before, and if you wanted to help defend yours throughout the event. The reason you really want to defend this is because, as you can see, my server has much less points than the enemy server, even though I'm pretty sure we had more points than them originally. They only beat us in the server war because they had much bigger players that took our throne. By taking our throne and becoming our king, they took 50% of our server war score and it was added to their amount. That's what happens, unfortunately, when your throne is taken. It's hard to defend against if you have very large spenders on the other server, especially if you're in a newer server like mine. So be careful of that happening. Make sure you plan with your other alliances to make sure that that doesn't happen where possible. Make sure you research your enemy server in this tab as well prior to the war so you can prepare for that. So there are general rankings, Monarch power rankings, and so on that you can check out. When going through these, try to determine who knows what they're doing and who doesn't. Even if they're a large spender, they might have dumb generals, like this player does. He was the bigger player that was causing some issues, although there were others too for us in our server war. Even though when you look at their refines, they've got troop load in their refines for their gear, which if you haven't checked out my other videos is definitely not what you do. They have base amount ones, which is not what you want. You want percentage buffs to siege and ranged on this particular general, which they do have some for sure, but it could be improved. Even though this is a very high level general in power, it's pretty bad in my opinion. And so look out for that using the knowledge from my other videos to determine who you're going to have to look out for. Obviously looking at Monarch power rankings. Now just before we get into some battle strategies and things like that, I wanted to mention how you can know who is in your server and who is not in your server currently that is teleported from the enemy server. So by coming in this tab that I'm in right now, in the Alliance Power Ranking, click on a alliance that you want to see, go to their view members, and just scroll through their member list. And as you see, they have their avatars here. There'll be a little like battle icon at the bottom middle of their avatar if they're currently in your server. This doesn't matter if they've got a bubble on them, if they're teleporting around or anything. As long as they're in your server, they'll instantly have a little icon there, so feel free to keep refreshing this, going out of it and coming back in to see if anyone else is coming in your server. A lot of people that will get high scores in the event will just keep refreshing these pages for hours on end, trying to find out who's there. Once you find someone that has that, let's say this one I'm on right now were to have that little icon, they're in my server, click on them, click detail, locate coordinates to use a arrest warrant item. When using that item, you might have to spend 2,000 gems if you already don't have one, so it can get expensive, but by doing that you'll be able to find out exactly where they are in your server, and you might be able to kill them, although be careful obviously, as players can teleport to you just as easily as you could teleport to them to attack them and to try to get those server war points. Just first on the battle strategies and things like that, in your items, when you start the war, you will get server war teleporters. When using these, you'll be teleported to a random location in the enemy server, and then if you wanted to go to a particular location to go attack someone, you would then, in addition to that, have to use an advanced teleport to go to their location and to kill them quickly. You can definitely buy more server teleporters if you run out of them. I think they're the same cost as advanced teleporters, and you can just teleport with random teleports if you really wanted to while you're in their server. If they spam attack you and destroy your wall HP, you'll be kicked out and go back to your current server. And also when you're in the enemy server, even if you're unbubbled, no one can steal your subordinate cities. They will have a red bubble on them, so you don't have to worry about that. When you teleport to the enemy server, you will have a 5-minute bubble that will be cancelled if you try to attack anyone or anything like that, obviously, or scout them. When that bubble runs out, you cannot bubble again. You can't use regular bubbles. The only way to get away from people is by using my ghosting video to hide your troops, or to just simply teleport away if all of your marches are inside your city. If someone was to try to spam attack you, they'll just kick you back to your own server, so you don't have to really worry about that. I won't go too much into just general PvP things, as I have videos on that type of thing, like an attacking guide. I will just go into some other key things that people might want to do. One thing is a switch hit. So what you can do, go to the world map, teleport somewhere either on your own server or the enemy server. You can get them to attack you on purpose. When they are just about to get to your city, teleport out of the way and allow a bigger player to teleport into your spot and take that attack for you. When that happens, it's just going to be like a regular attack, but it was on that player, not you. And depending on if they have better stats, better troops and so on the defense, they might be able to actually destroy the enemy with a very good ratio. So that's something that you can do. Definitely, I didn't add this in the preparing for server versus server segment, but that's alright. With the temples that are on the map, which just for reference are these 3 buildings. So there's one here, there's one up the top, and the top left here. When you're communicating with the rest of the alliances on your server, feel free to get certain alliances to crowd the temples to make it much harder for the enemy to actually teleport close to them and have an easy access to them to reinforce them and to be able to get occupying time on it. The occupying time will always be displayed below the name here, so you'll be able to see the cumulative time they've had, and you'll also be able to tell if you've managed to stop the timer or not. Although you can send one troop to it if it's empty and take their name off of it, it's not really worth doing because they'll only start to occupy it if they have enough troops in there to get the timer to go up. So you can't just create alternative accounts that are level 7, teleport there and occupy it. You do need to have 5 million power in there to occupy it, so you do bear that in mind. although you might want to change the name on it, doesn't really matter. But by surrounding the temple, it'll make it harder for them, it'll make it riskier for them, because in your own server, you can bubble, they cannot. They have to ghost their troops, or just hope that they don't get destroyed by a large player. So it's a very good thing to just make it as hard as possible for them, and that's why it can be good to use the strategy of finding out who's in your server, or who's not in your server, that I showed you before, just to stay bubbled and teleport to targets as you see fit. Although again, be careful, because sometimes they can come to your server as a trap, and then they can get their large players to teleport in on you when you try to attack them, and they kill you while you're trying to kill someone else, and it may be more points for them than it is for you, so you have to be careful with that. I just wanted to mention as well, in scoring points, I did miss out the fairies and statues that can be found on the world map. So just like this boss is sitting over here, you can find randomly on the map fairies. I'm not going to show what they look like right now because I'm not actually in this server versus server event, but you just scroll around and you'll see them. They're called fire spirits, but they look like little fairies, very glittery and things like that. And also the statues as well, that are pretty obvious. They're pretty big. They're as big as a city really, maybe even bigger on the map. Those are rarer, but they will give more points, those statues, and they will also give the other items that you can use to revive your troops. And that's going to be how the players that do not have the ability to spend a lot of money and to participate in maybe the first or second or third SVS, they can at least visit those fairies while bubbled and these statues. You can also do that in the enemy server if you wanted to, and you will get increased points, but it's not too much. I think it's like 2-3 times as much points, but it doesn't add up to much when you could just kill one player and have infinitely more points than you would get the entire war through those fairies. So other battle strategies that you're going to have to be using, make sure that you're speed attacking, you're speed rallying other players. If you're doing an alliance rally where you're all putting your troops together as an alliance and attacking a large player, make sure you use my other videos to know whether or not you're going to kind of be able to do that and win. But if you're going to do that, you need to speed your troops into the rally and then speed the troops at the person you're attacking. If you're just attacking them yourself, you're going to have to speed it too. If you don't, you're just going to be making yourself a target even more. Personally, I speed them to the target and I speed them back to make sure I can hide them again via ghosting. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out my video on ghosting and then you'll understand it. For anyone that's getting a little bit confused with this stuff, again, ask questions in the comments down below. Feel free to do multiple questions in one, I don't mind. On that note, I will just quickly go through what beats what for people that haven't seen some of my other videos. Mounted will beat ground, ground will beat ranged, ranged will beat mounted. Siege don't necessarily defeat anything particularly well. They're fairly weak, but at least they have that range on the other troop types, and they're not necessarily going to have a debuff against any particular troop type. So they can do a little bit better than mounted against ranged, for instance. Make sure you're doing these large rallies against buildings and other things, because if you're not doing that, you might be losing unnecessary troops. If you're in your own server, you can definitely afford to do that because you can be bubbled and you can ghost your troops before unbubbling. You're a lot safer, so make sure you're trying to get as high of a ratio as possible. Don't allow people in your server to tell you just because they won that they couldn't have won by more. There's always an improvement. Just because you got a 2 ratio against someone doesn't mean you could have had an 8 ratio, especially if you're a very large spender and you're attacking someone that's half your size. So do bear that in mind. Make sure people are always growing. Make sure people are not just getting cocky like that, because it will cause issues in the future when you go against harder opponents. And these people always make excuses for themselves. In helping with that ratio, make sure you have keep 30s with watchtower level 30s in their city, scouting other players, finding out their stats. When you have that level of a watchtower, you can find out the stats of an enemy, which will make it much easier to know how you're going to defeat them, how you stack up against them. If you wanted to test your own stats, feel free to attack another player, even a low level player in your own server, to see what happens on the report, see what stats you have. Make sure you use all of your buffs, dragons, your best general, and gear, and so on, and factor in that by attacking a low level player, your debuffs on your report may not show up. Again, check the boards for the enemy, check their generals, check their alliance powers, their monarch powers, compare it against your own, prepare for that. Feel free to just hunker down, bubble up in your server, kill anyone that's in your own server that's unbubbling, make sure the enemy doesn't get it. Just take your kills where you can get them and you might be able to win, although be careful, if they take your throne, it is impossible to win because of the scoring system. Now we're just going to very quickly go through the event center again, just to look at some of the rewards in the server war. So if you scroll down, I think it's on get scores, I can't quite remember. Yeah, so as you see here, depending on your scores, you'll get these boxes, you'll get all of them. As long as if you get the top one, you'll get all of the ones above it. 15,000 gems for that one, then 10,000, then 8,000. So that really stacks up. You'll get all of the rewards. You won't just get the top one. So it really stacks up. Getting those points is going to be really good. 64 million points is pretty damn easy for a larger account like mine, although I've just not been active, so I haven't been getting that. In addition, you'll get plenty of rewards for being place 1. And you can just kind of go through on this screen and find your own, depending on your alliance scores as well. You'll be able to get different rewards based on that. And you can actually check out after each war how every single server did against others, if for any reason you wanted to check those out. Apart from that, if you actually do win quite big, you can go into the decorate. And I think in here somewhere in like activity, the first ranked player in SVS winning server receives the Errors Castle decoration, and I think there is a avatar frame as well. So there are a lot of rewards to get. There's a lot of gems to get, just like the Battlefield videos that I'm going to be doing in the future. Those are going to show you get a lot of rewards from doing those. Even if you don't do fantastic in them, you can get a lot. So make sure you're participating in these events. If you have any questions, feel free to put it down below, and do keep an eye out for my website that will be coming out soon. Thank you for watching.